And now, please join me in welcoming Kumardev Chatterjee, who is a thought leader and a metaverse mastermind for the keynote presentation of Web 3.0 and the future of marketing. Kumardev is a globally known metaverse mastermind, serial tech innovator, founder, entrepreneur, industry leader, investor, author, keynote speaker, and expert on the Web3 and a range of technology topics with more than 25 years of strategy, deep tech, and executive leadership at startups and Fortune 500s across Europe, USA, and Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Kumardev Chatterjee.
Hello, everybody. So, Maharab Bariyad, so nice to be here. Thank you, Martech Vibe, for inviting me, and especially Farida, who has been working very hard to make this happen over a short period of time. It's great to be here, and before I kick it off, I think thank you for the introduction. If this was in the US, I would have said to localize and personalize as you marketers believe. I would have said, hey, I'm ex-Adobe, ex-GE, and my last company is to work with Facebook. But since this is Saudi, to localize and personalize, I'll say I'm actually, I was a part of Neom. So we just talked about Neom. And I was the co-founder of the Neom Metaverse, so I worked in Neom for a while. And this is not the first time I'm in Riyadh. But I'll be talking about different things today from what I used to do in Neom in the past. So, this is, I think, the only session on Web3 and Metaverse over the last 2 days. So let's start with the data, and I'm a firm believer in data. Is that when you look at, if you think about the impact, and the question is obviously how does Web3 impact and the future impact marketing, let's first start with what's driving Web3, because the answer to the second question, or that question, lies in the same data that is driving the adoption of Web3. So if you looked at Q4 2021, it's about a year from now, we're going to have the new data soon. NFT sales, non-fungible tokens, topped almost 25 billion. And that was during the pandemic, right? So people were at home. Activity was very low. And at the same time, VCs poured almost 17 billion pounds into, dollars into NFTs and in that particular space. I'll give you the latest data very soon, but that tells you how this thing took off. Why did Web3 suddenly become a buzzword? Because serious amounts of cash flowed into the segment. Digital payments. I don't know if you've, MasterCard is in the room, of course, so you would have heard that MasterCard, Visa, they're all now integrating with making crypto payments available, but they're not the only ones. There are a number of banks. Almost 50% of all banks around the world today are working on making digital payments or digital asset-based payments available. So very soon in 2023, your bank card, your debit card will do, among other things, payments in crypto, right? And it'll become de facto. Apple is working on that too. You must have heard of the latest announcements in Apple Pay. Entertainment, retail, this thing is a little bit old now, but this is still one of the biggest investments. The F1 is putting in 100 million, and following them, a lot of other brands and organizations and companies jumped in. But digital real estate has been the big one, particularly for the region where there's a lot of real estate investment, a lot of real estate activity. This is one of the key drivers of the whole Web3 movement, so to speak, right? You must have heard of the yacht, which was sold, virtual yacht sold for 650K in Sandbox, which is one of the metaverse platforms. But there have been a lot more. So this explosion, this Web3 explosion, is based on real activity, market activity, or industrial, or let's say activity in the tech sector. And the growth rates are phenomenal. But the basic fundamental remains the same. These are all platforms. Whether it's a crypto platform like Coinbase, or Binance as an exchange, whether it's a metaverse platform like Decentraland, whether it's a DeFi platform where you can trade and hedge, these are all platforms, and the fundamental economics is the same, is that how much time can you get somebody to spend on the platform? The more time they spend, hopefully the more engaged they are, and the more personalized the services they receive, the more revenue you will make. So all the models that you guys were talking about, is still at the very basis of what Web3 is. So it's not a fundamentally different model or way of working. So a lot of the things that you're trying to solve in the Web2 or in the traditional digital marketing space applies to Web3 as well. Now, what has happened is that although there is a global slowdown, we see that investments in Web3 have absolutely exploded. So I'm going to come to the Metaverse in a second, but even apart from the Metaverse, if you look at some of the other areas, about 18 billion in 2022 already. I'm talking this data is from August, so we'll see what happens by the end of the year, but it'll definitely exceed that amount, right? Blockchain alone, 14.6. But if you look at the sectors, you would see that NFTs were only 18.3%. A majority of the sectors are gaming and infrastructure. Infrastructure as in plumbing. These are the very sectors where you need personalized services. So in terms of let's say the problem space, it just tripled. You're no longer solving for pure play commerce or platforms that syndicate. You're now solving for Web3 as well. And here's what will make it more interesting. All of that Web3 space is bolting on to your Web2. So yes, you will move from the standard Facebook, if you are actually that inclined, you'll move from the standard Facebook website to their Web3 meta space. And it'll happen for other brands as well. F1 is doing that, Porsche is doing that, other companies are doing that. So there will be an integration of the existing spaces and the Web3 spaces that brands are moving to. So the problems that you have to solve for suddenly increase, not decrease. And not a new problem, it's the same thing. How do you capture, engage, personalize, and increase revenue from? So let's look at the Metaverse for a second, because I think this audience will understand this very well. First of all, 5 trillion has been spent on this already. So if anybody, and sometimes we get this, messages, we read the media and we say, oh, well, look, Meta is failing and the space is not working. Sorry guys, it's not the reality. The reality is that there has been so much money invested in here that whether Meta makes it or not, the Metaverse is here to stay. So there will be a new Meta. Remember, there was no Facebook before Facebook, right? We used to find other ways to communicate. So the fact that Facebook may not make it in the Metaverse space doesn't mean that the Metaverse as a space will disappear. It's a fundamental mistake. It's here to stay. Advertising, virtual advertising, is going to skyrocket. So we haven't seen the end of that model. We've just seen we are going to the next level of that model. I'll come to personalization in a second. Ramping up exponentially, the numbers speak for themselves. But I think this panel is the most interesting one. 60% of people, Gen Zs and others, and I'm a Gen Z myself, so I can definitely attest to that, prefer at least one activity in the virtual world to the real. At least one. And actually, if you look into the data, if you take away 100% and go to 60% or 50%, they prefer 5 or more activities in the virtual world. In other words, they prefer sitting at home and not going out. And the Brian Chesky said that very well yesterday. He said, the issue of working from home is not that people don't come back to office, is that the home becomes the world. Your Netflix is your theater, Zoom is your office, and Meta is your social space. And that's where we're getting to. 59% have already made a purchase in the Metaverse. How many of you here fall in that 59%? Right? So think about that. Even though most of us haven't done it, okay, I have done it, but people are doing it. People are actually selling and purchasing goods today in proto-metaverses. We don't have a real metaverse at the moment. Even in Neom, we don't have that, right? 79% are excited about transitioning. I think as in the VC world, we say it's not about what your revenue is, it's about your growth potential. So the same thing here, it's not really about what is happening, it's about who else want to get onto it, what is the potential for growth. 79% want to get onto that. Oops, I don't know what I did there. And in the region, okay, I was in Asia before this I was in Asia, from where Martek flew me down here. So I was talking about what happened in Thailand. There is 200 million to build this Metaverse platform, but our friends next door They want to do 40,000 jobs. Damak has already invested 100 million. And of course, you must have heard of the Dubai Metaverse Assembly that happened 2 weeks ago, where their strategy is really to put the whole city on the Metaverse. And a number of companies are doing that. One of them is asking me to advise them. So the reality is that wherever there's construction, wherever there is a growth that is focused not only on products or infrastructure or commodity, but also on services, the Metaverse will play a key role. Right? And the Vision 2030 explicitly nods to that. And of course, the MCIT and His Excellency Al Soha is always very involved in understanding that and trying to make that happen. So I'm not a marketeer per se, but I believe in data-driven, coming from the tech world, I naturally believe in data-driven activities, whether that's for anything else or marketing. And so these are the sectors that will be affected by Web 3.0. I mean, these are not the only sectors, but these are the major sectors. And what caught my eye from the statistical or the computer science, from the mathematical point of view, is a CAGR. These are amazing CAGR rates. This data comes from McKinsey and Deloitte, right? So this is not data that was just pumped up somewhere. And I believe this is an underestimation, because already we've got 5 trillion invested in metaverse space. So this numbers to me seem like a high underestimation, because the space is growing faster than anybody imagined. So there's a lot to play for, different sectors, huge amount of segmentation, and yes, we still don't understand the customer. So what are the sectors? Funnily enough, of course, apart from tech, media, entertainment, energy and resources, that puts Saudi and the region prime in the spotlight. Because energy and resources, there's a lot that you can do with metaverses that we haven't even touched upon today. Of course, automotive, machinery, assembly, consumer, healthcare, these will follow. But the leading space is media, entertainment, high tech, and energy and resources, which is where the region plays a big role. Construction, funnily enough, is not catching up. And as a testimony to that, although Damak has wanting to put 100 million into doing that, it pales compared to the announcement from Flipkart, which is one of the world's biggest e-commerce sites now, saying they're building their own metaverse. So Flipkart is not going to be available as an e-commerce site bolt-on to Meta or Decentraland or Sandbox. Flipkart will have its own metaverse. How long before Alibaba is doing that? Alibaba is actually already doing that. So is Weibo. And Amazon, they tried for a few years. They're not focusing on that now, but it's just a matter of time. Google will follow. Microsoft is in the room. Microsoft already have a fantastic suite of metaverse products, which I can say because I have personally seen and tested some of them. This is happening. So if you want to segment the space, we've got the gaming industry. Of course, they always have a head start here. What I call proto-metaverses, because they're not real metaverses yet. So you can add Fortnite, you can add Decentraland, Sandbox, and others in that space. Mixed reality ecosystems, Apple is actually lagging. Microsoft is a leader here. Niantic have a legacy, the Pokemon Go. And of course, digital asset marketplaces. I haven't put Meta there for obvious reasons. I mean, we know that Meta has started the big push here. So what does the user landscape look like? If you want to personalize services and you want to understand the challenge to marketing, you want to understand what the user is. So here, interestingly enough, there has been some amount of segmentation, some amount of analysis done already, even though it's quite new. And the typical user is an average of 30 years, and the origin is worldwide, which makes it very complex because, of course, as we know, as you go across the globe, taste change and localization becomes even, I mean, how can you track the localization of people all around the world? I mean, Facebook has tried to do that, Twitter has tried to do that to a certain degree, but it's complicated. So if you have a platform the way you want to do e-commerce, and we are going to try to account for the interest of different people, you'll have to go beyond just the standard, oh, this is what I do in my space, right? It's about how do you put a framework around that? And the framework is, okay, they're young, they're normally wealth creators, which means that they're typically not so interested in a 9 to 5. They're socially very engaged. So all that interaction on the channels, the different channels that you talk about, that's going to be mixed. They're digitally curious from a very young age. So digital natives, I mean, I think this term is now old for me, is digital first or virtual first. There are people who are now coming on board who are going to be on the metaverse space for whom the virtual is the real. Of course, educated, environmentally conscious, and open thinking, right? So this is the kind of framework that you need to be able to target. And then as you segment that, you could say, well, I would define a large number of my users on the standard and the pro user type of typical, but you'll have to think about partners and customers, where not all of your users will be customers. And not all of your customers will be partners. So these are the challenges that you need to account for when you think about how Web3 will affect your marketing goals, your marketing strategy. So here are some use cases that I want to go through. So one of them is fractional ownership. This is the number one use case today. Owning digital assets or a fraction of them. You can't own one Bitcoin, but you can own 0.5% of a Bitcoin or 0.75 of Bitcoin, right? Similarly with a digital asset, which is a piece of land on decentral land, maybe you can't own a piece of land in decentral land, but you can own 30% of it, right? So instead of saying, if your product is, I sell pieces of land, suddenly instead of having one customer for one product or one piece of the product, you can have 10 customers for one piece of the product. Digital advertising. Nothing has happened in the world of digital advertising that will happen now. So the digital billboards, if you think of the Quest camera, the new camera that's come out, it has 5 inward-facing, the new headset from Meta, Quest Pro, $1,500, but it has 5 inward-facing cameras. So the 5 cameras inside looking at your face and your expressions as you navigate the world, as you navigate or use that particular headset. Why are they doing that? Because they're trying to capture your data to track what your facial movements may be compared to what you're seeing. So if you're seeing a particular ad, how does your face actually reconfigure? Think about the engagement. How do you now start measuring engagement? If the eye is open for 35 seconds, it means they're more engaged or less engaged. What happens with the multiple ads? Things like that. So nothing that has yet been done in this space compares to what has to be done or what's coming. Sponsored NFT monetization, the most easy one. So that's the baseball card stuff. In the past, 30 years ago, you would collect these baseball cards, and then hopefully one day, and initially it was fun to trade them, and now they're worth millions. In today's world, you collect tokens, which are fractions of something, of an asset, and again, they're worth millions, but not in 30 years, in 3 years or less. So if you are a major brand, or you want to be a major brand, and you want to keep engaged, should sponsored NFT monetization be a part of your strategy or not? Is it only for the Pradas and the Balenciagas? Is it for other companies too? User-generated NFT monetization. This is the one where you see the OpenSea and you go and users generating NFTs and then generating digital assets. But they could do that for your brand as well, right? Adidas could say, okay, I would allow a user to design an Adidas shoe and have a competition, and you all design Adidas shoes digitally, and you put them on the Adidas NFT store. And you can have a sort of an Adidas, instead of Adidas with the Pharrell, you can have Adidas XYZ person from somewhere, but because they designed a fantastic shoe, that Adidas has co-branded and you've sold it, and the guy makes about 10% of that. And all of this is digital, so there's no manufacturing involved, there's no logistics involved. So how does that shift your brand image between those who will do it and those who won't? Will Nike do it? Virtual goods and services, the most obvious one. I think we get that very well. But this is the one I think is the most important. Breakout in the physical world, combining the digital and the physical. So we are in a conference, or we are in somewhere, but can we be there without actually being there, and vice versa? Can we go to a conference of 3,000 people, and based on the subscription that we've paid, we sit with the speakers in the front row while we are actually 3,000 kilometers away? What is the value of that? Let's say if you take the Paris fashion show, only 100 people, 100 to 150 people fit in that room. And of course, they pay for it, right? And some are invited. But there could be thousands of people outside who would pay for the privilege of being projected digitally into the digital version of that room in real time. So you're looking at a completely different model. The same happens to real estate or to buildings or to construction. So if you can combine the digital and the physical, which is where a lot of companies are going, then you're able to do things in a very different way. But it also becomes very challenging to then market and keep the consistency of your brand in that particular space. So what are the key features and the value proposition? Number one, Web3 and Metaverse will lead to a fully immersive experience. It will not happen all the time and from day one. I think that's why a lot of people are mistaken. The same issue applies to Meta. I think, oh, why is it not fantastically great experience from day one? It's going to take 5 to 6 years. But ultimately, all of these will be fully immersive experiences, right? And so you will have to aim for a scenario where your brand or your product or your asset is actually in a world which is fully immersive for customers who are not physically there. So they would interact with your brand, and it should be as real as it feels in the shop, because a lot of the sales will happen just in that space. They will never go to any shop. And I think somebody was talking about the in-store experience. Nobody will actually walk into a store, so forget about the in-store experience. The store experience is the metaverse experience of your store or your brand, right? Number two, licensing, franchising. The metaverse, this is going to be a fundamental change here, because once you are able to provide your product or your service in a platform, you can then license that to other platforms, right? And then people, for example, somebody could enter Decentraland, click on a door, and that door opens them to Prada's new store in Paris, which Prada has built. And that door is also available, let's say, on Sandbox. That door is available in other places, right? So it's not enough to say that we are just going to look at what we can create in our experience or in the closed world that we're able to create, which is great, but how will that integrate with other worlds? But that's how you're going to get the traffic. Otherwise, you risk having less than 8,000 active users a day, which might not be so good for your revenue metrics. And the remote physical experience. So this is this local, we talked about VR centers, that you go to a cinema house or you go to a kiosk and play with VR. Increasingly, you're going to have metaverse experience centers, but these will be in your home. So there will be a chair, which is highly responsive and moves, like gaming chairs, and you will have a headset. And with that, you will immerse yourself in multiple worlds and experience brands, products, services, in social engagement, do your work. All of that will happen. So this is how I think, these are just 3 areas. Of course, we are at the end of time, so I have to wrap up now. There's a lot more to discuss in this space. But just to say, I think, for me, the 3 main messages are, looking forward to 2023. Number one, Web3 to the moon. It's not going to go the other way, guys. It doesn't matter if there's a bear market. Doesn't matter if there's been a crash in crypto. It is Web3 to the moon. Number two, there will be convergence of platforms. Not standalone platforms, not one major platform, but convergence of platforms. And number 3, you have to be personalized. You have to be unique to just stand out. I can comfortably take a bet here that the top 10 brands in the metaverse have not even been invented yet. So it's not going to be the existing brands. Thank you very much.